recording, first of all. There we go. And I keep doing that. I keep moving around because I'm not used to being in 2D that much. But we've just got a basic, just an empty scene. It's not empty because, you know, it's got the default cube, but hey ho, we're going to delete that because that's just what you do when you open Blender. Everybody just deletes whatever's there and starts again. So I'm going to start with a tree. And the easiest way to make a tree, in my opinion, this is the way I do it. I'm sure there are other methods. And if anybody uses any other method, I'll be very interested to know what they do, because I always like to learn new techniques. But the way I do it is I'll start off with just a single vertex and start drawing out kind of thing, me branches. And to make a single vertex, the easiest way is to just bring in a plane. So add, mesh, plane, go into edit mode, 1 for vertex mode, and then M for merge and merge at center. And we've got one single vertex right in the middle there. And we can literally, it's easier, I think, to get started just to hit 1 on your numpad, go into front view, excuse me, and extrude that vertex. So it's E for extrude, and then just pull it up to however tall you want your tree. And you can see there, if I select everything, we've got a line. So we can then just start extruding bits out to make branches. That's a bit far. So I'll extrude that bit out there, and out there, and out there. So I'm just selecting the vertices and extruding them. We can have that come out a little bit, maybe a couple here. And then make some little twiggy bits, perhaps. Something like that. I'm literally just selecting a vertex and E and then just dragging it to roughly where I want it to be. We could even have some little branches coming off here if we wanted. You could select these two and subdivide, just right click and subdivide, and then you get a new vertex which we can then extrude out. And that could have a few twigs coming off it, I guess you could say. Something like that. Just move that over a little bit like that. And once you're kind of happy enough with your tree, we then add a modifier, and it's called the skin modifier. So this is basically our skeleton, and we're going to put skin on it. And it looks ridiculous, but if you go into edit mode and hit A to select all the vertices, and then Control and A, we can scale each vertex down. If you go into, click up here to X-ray mode, you can see all the way through it, and you can see the vertices individually. We can do Control and E and bring that one up a little bit if we want.
It's a little bit weird that you can do that like in the settings, in the modifier settings though.
Yeah.
You would think that you'll be able to.
Be able to do what? I'm not sure what you mean.
Make it thinner like that.
Yeah, I know, but it's because it's on a per vertex basis. I think that's why they do it. They don't. It's not in the modifier settings. And then these end ones, I'm going to scale those down a bit so we get little skinny ends to our twigs. I'll just select these ones as well.
Hallo, guten Tag.
Hey.
Hello.
Welcome.
And I'm just going to drag this one out a bit because
Hey,
these are
Bart.
looking a bit weird
Hi, Kristen.
with them being so
Long time no see.
short.
Yeah, I still remember you.
I was about to put my controllers down in mid-air because I thought it was a real desk.
Oh wow.
And then another thing you can do to make it look a little bit more realistic as well is we can add a subdivision surface to it. And then that's just another modifier that'll just subdivide everything. Make any more changes that you want to it. I'm going to make that a bit fatter at the bottom here, and we'll make this bolus bit here a bit bigger as well. But once you're happy enough with your tree, you can come out of edit mode. You can apply all of your modifiers. Now I've got these handy buttons here. I can just hit one button and it'll apply everything. That's just a modifier, which I believe, it's just an add-on rather, I believe is just called modifier tools. It's built into the version of Blender that I'm using, an old version. Not entirely sure if it's still a built-in add-on in Blender. It may be one that you have to install from the website, but it should still be a free thing that you can install. You just tick that. I won't do that for now. We'll pretend I haven't got it. So if you are applying your modifiers, you want them all applied, apply them in the order that you added them, or the order that you decided they worked best. So you work from the top to bottom. So we'll apply the skin and we'll apply the subdivision surface. So now, if I go into edit mode, we now have a mesh, and it's a little bit dense, but that's fine. We're going to do a little bit of work on it just to make it look a little bit better to start with. I'll go into front view, and in X-ray mode, I'm just going to select these bottom vertices. The reason I'm in X-ray mode is so it selects everything all the way through the mesh. If I was in front view, for instance, and I just selected, you can see it hasn't selected the ones on the other side, which isn't what I want. I want everything. So I've just drawn a box around it, and then I'm going to flatten these out. And because I want to move some of the vertices down and some of them up till they're all on the same level, that means I need to flatten them on the Z axis. So we hit scale Z0, and that's them all flattened, and then I can move them down a bit on the Z, just using G for grab and then Z for the axis, and I'm just going to bring it to just
Yeah,
below
don't worry about
the
it.
centre line, and then I'll scale it up a bit as well. So it kind of looks like where the roots would come out, and I'll scale that one up a little bit as well, so it looks a bit more natural. If you right click, you can also apply the auto smooth, and you might find some edges are smooth and some aren't. Just open up this menu and you can increase the angle. Basically what it decides is anything up to an angle of 30, I think is the default, will be smoothed, and anything over 30 will remain a sharp edge. So just increase the angle until it catches all of those edges and looks nice and smooth. We've still got a bit of a sharp edge there, so I'll increase that a bit more, and we've still got a sharp edge here. So just keep going till it kind of looks a bit better. It's a bit of a weird looking tree, it's a bit lopsided, but never mind. And then because we do have quite a lot of geometry, we want to try and clean this up and make it as performant as possible. So anywhere where there's a straight piece of the mesh, I would just get rid of all of these loops that's around it. We don't need those. So we'll press 2 to go into edge mode, and I find the best way is just to select what you want. I'm doing that by holding
Alt,
down
right?
the Alt key and selecting one of the edges. Alt and select will actually select the ring, the full ring, the full loop. And then Alt and Shift, I can then select more loops. And I want to go all the way up to about there. I'm not going to select that one because there's an angle here. It needs that loop to give you the flare out, and the same for this one. But all these ones where it's completely straight in between, I'm going to get rid of them. And you can do that by hitting X and dissolve edges. Now another thing you can do, I'll just undo that. You could try selecting everything, hitting X and limited dissolve and see what happens. Sometimes it does a pretty good job, sometimes it misses them. So you might still have to do a little bit of clean up, and sometimes you have to add some joins where, like here, we need that. So you have to like repair this bit, and you have to clean up bits that it's missed. Like, you know, so we're not going to do that. It's worth trying just to see what happens. But for now, I'll be as quick as I can, and we'll just get rid of some of these loops. Now, obviously, the more branches you have, the more complicated your tree you are making work for yourself. But I would recommend just be patient. Don't be lazy. Spend time trying to make a nice bushy looking tree, because you've got to remember what's going to make it look bushy is by the time we get the leaves on it. And if it's too sparse, it's not going to look that great. My tree is way too sparse, but I'm doing it quickly to show you because we've got other techniques to get through, so I don't want to waste too much time. Another thing you can try to clean up as well is if you select an edge and select another edge, just a couple should do. You could go to select similar and direction, and it'll select all the ones that are going in exactly the same direction. Now it has selected these, which is wrong. So you've got to be careful of that as well. Once you've done that, you can do select loops, edge loops, and it gets all those. Now I don't want that loop selected, and I don't want that loop selected, and I don't want any of these. So that's a bit of a bummer. Usually it doesn't quite go that wrong, but if you zoom in, you can see if there's any others. It should. Let's get rid of that. And by the time we hit 0, if it just zooms in on this, you know it's clean. So we can get rid of those. I'll try the same on this one. And a shortcut as well, when you pull down select, you'll see under similar, there's a little underscore in the R. So that's a shortcut. You can just hit the letter R. And then direction, there's an underscore under the D for direction. So if we were to hit select RD, it does the same thing. And the same for the loops. We've got an underscore under the P and one under E. So we can hit select EP, and it's that hasn't quite worked. I've probably hit something wrong. Select RD, select EP. No, that's not going to work, and the reason, I'm guessing, is because we've got some of these loops going in the same directions elsewhere on the tree. So we'll not bother with that for now. I think we'll miss that one. We'll use these ones. And there. I'm not going to spend time doing every single little twig because we'll be here all day. But the next thing you want to do is to come out of edit mode. And we need to create a leaf that we're going to cover the tree with. And one of the easiest ways to create a leaf is to just use an image of a leaf with transparency, put it on a plane, and that's it. Your plane is the leaf. And it's minimal geometry. Should be reasonably performant because you're just using the same material on every single leaf. I know there's transparency in it, but it's not too bad. So there's another useful add-on called Import Images as Planes, which I'm sure you will find absolutely invaluable just tick that, make sure it's working, and then you can import images as planes and see if you can find a nice leaf. I've got some already downloaded. It's easy enough just to have a look for, I don't know what we're going to look for. See, I've been looking up Samantha Fox to check out it was the right person that Iron Wolf was talking about. You can literally look up leaf alpha texture, PNG, and you'll get loads popping up, and many of these are free. This is one I've already downloaded. Any of those will do. So I'm going to, where was I? My project, assets, shed, because I did start making a shed and I just used the same folder. And then just pick a leaf. Because it's a tree, I'm going to use this maple leaf here. And we'll go into material view so we can see
Canada.
it. Yeah. Go Canada. So we'll reset the rotation there and move it over a little bit. That'll do. And then the best way to get your leaves working, I've found, excuse me, is to have it pointing along the y-axis, flat on the floor kind of thing. So I'm going to go into top-down view and I'll rotate it by, well, that wasn't right, try that again. Top-down view, rotate, half a rotate, 45 degrees, and I'll hit minus to go in the opposite direction. That'll do. And then if we go into edit mode, was I in edit mode? Looks like I already was. We'll put the origin there. I don't know, this again is another modifier. But in order to set the origin for something, you would normally put the cursor to the vertex, and then when you're in object mode, you would just right click and choose set origin to 3D cursor, and that would do it. It's a longer way around. This modifier I've got just speeds it up for me, that's all it is. Put the cursor back to the world origin. So the reason I'm putting the origin there is because this is where the leaf is sprouting from. This is going to be the attachment point onto the tree. So it needs to be wherever you want it to actually be appearing from the surface. And once you've done that, we then want to set the rotation and the scale. You'll see the rotation is currently at 45. The scale is actually okay, that's correct at 1. But we want rotation to be 0. So Control and A and set the rotation and we're good to go. So if I select the tree, we're now going to add a particle system, which is totally different to Unity's particle system. So if you're thinking about that, please get it out of your head, because Blender's is a different animal altogether. We add that. The particle system is this little icon here where it's got little things coming out of an object. But instead of an emitter, this is the emitter here, we're going to use hair, and it suddenly becomes all hairy. But we don't want hair to be anywhere except from the branches. So really anything from this bolus all the way down the trunk, we don't want any hair. So to fix that, we go into X-ray mode, 7 on the numpad to go into top-down view, tab into edit mode, and we basically want to select, well, all of that really, don't we? What I didn't do, what I should have done, was cleaned up this one branch, because I've made work for myself there. Let's just get rid of those. There we go. And we'll select all of that. And then we'll also hold down shift and select that lot as well. So that's where I don't want leaves to sprout from. I do want leaves to sprout from everything else, and that's what I want to select. So I'll just now hit Control and I to invert the selection. And then if you come down to this little green triangle here, you can create a vertex group. So we add a vertex group, and these vertices we're going to assign to the group. And now if we go back to the particle system, down here there's a tab that says vertex groups, and under density you can assign different properties to different groups, which is really useful for all kinds of things, but all we want to use this for is density. We choose the vertex group we've just created, and now if I get rid of that, you'll see it's all coming from the trunk. If we choose group, now we've only got the particles coming from the branches, and you'll see that better if we turn the number of particles down to about 20. There's nothing coming from the trunk or the bolus at the top at all. It's just the branches. So now what we want to do is we want to turn on advanced, because we need to be able to control the rotation. So by hitting advanced, we then get a new tab here called rotation, which will tick and expand. But first of all, what we want to do is under render, instead of path, we're going to tell it we want it to render an object. And the object we want, let's go back into material view. We can just use the picker here, the little eyedropper, and choose the leaf. And now we've got some leaves sprouting out of the tree.
Ooh.
We then want to tell it that we want it to sprout out at the normal tangent, so it's coming off at whatever direction the normal is facing on each face that it's growing from. We can increase the number of particles if we want, make it a bit more bushy. We can add a bit of scale randomness, because at the moment all of these leaves are the same size, they're all identical. So we can increase the randomness. I'll turn it all the way up so we get some small and some large. Got a tiny little one there, and we'll increase the scale. Ooh, that's a bit much. Scale a bit more. If that's moving too quickly for you, you can hold down shift on just about any slider, or even when you're moving and scaling stuff, and it'll slow it right down. You've got much more control. We can increase the number a bit more as well, add a few more leaves, and we can add a bit of randomness to the rotation, so crank that up a little bit. The phase is useful. That doesn't really do an awful lot here, but if you had your leaf facing another way, you could have your leaves like lying flat to the branches or sticking straight out, or it can be really useful. But we've got leaves. Now, I haven't done that many branches on here, so it's not a particularly bushy tree. It's a bit sparse. We can try increasing the number of leaves a bit, but it's not going to improve it that much. Like I say, I would recommend just spend a bit of time working on your tree and getting it looking the best that you can, really. Once you've done that, you can then, actually what I'm going to do, because there's a bit of a weird, I can see a little bit of weird transparency going on. So the original leaf, I'm going to just fix the material on it. Instead of alpha blend, I'm going to change that to alpha clip. And now the leaves look properly opaque and we haven't got that weird shimmer going on. So when you're happy enough with that, you can go into the modifiers. You've got this particle system modifier. You can make the instances real. So instead of, like for instance, if I was to change anything on this this leaf, if I was to apply that rotation I've just done, it's going to affect every leaf on the tree. Because they're linked, they're basically just instances of this one leaf. But we want to make them actual real objects that don't rely on the Blender particle system, so it's something that we can import into Unity. So to do that, dead easy, make instances real, and you suddenly get hundreds of leaves. And if you scroll all the way down till you find your plane, because I didn't change the name to trunk and I should have done, or tree or whatever, just hold down Control and select the plane as well, and then Control and J to join them all together. And that, don't worry, that hasn't disappeared, it's just because it didn't have a material. We're going to assign one. So actually let's do that now. We'll create a material. I'm going to call it bark, and I'm just going to give it a colour for now, but we will unwrap it properly in a little bit. And then we'll try that again. Make instances real. Come all the way down. Select the trunk. Control and J. And they're joined together. And then you can just get rid of the particle system. And that's it. This is an independent thing now. So no matter what I do to this leaf, it's not connected to the tree anymore. That is just it, the way it is. Now normally what I would do is I would add some bark to this, but we'd have to actually unwrap the whole thing. And UV unwrapping, I've covered it in the past. I'm happy to go over it now quickly if you wish. I think what I would like to do is see if we've got time to do that, because I do want to do the other techniques.
Could you use Blender Kit?
You could use Blender Kit, yes.
To just save some time.
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to, because if you remember last time I tried to use Blender Kit, Blender crashed 3 times. It was a complete shit show. So I'm not going to do that. We'll have a look at that in a little bit. Hopefully I'm going to have time to do the bark.
Okay.
It's not difficult to do, but it is time consuming. So I'm going to quickly move on to the next thing. The next thing I want to do is a plant that grows upright. Something that you could perhaps have growing out of a pot, maybe, a plant pot. So in fact, I tell you what, why don't we make a plant pot? So let's have a think. How tall's a plant pot, do you reckon? Let's see, maybe 8 inches. 8 inches, and then I'll just copy the scale from here over to the others. I think we're going to give it maybe 12 sides. Oh, look at that. That's reset the size. Of course it has, because I could have changed it here. I could have literally put 8 inches in there, but I wanted to have the scale correct. There we go, that'll do. We'll just apply the rotation and scale. I'll go into the top. Face view by pressing 3, we can select that face. I'll scale that out a little bit. What else can I do? I'm speeding ahead here, sorry. Loop cut, Control and R for a loop cut. Click and then you can move it up to wherever you want it. Back to face mode, hold down Alt and click on one of the edges and it'll select the full loop of faces. E for extrude, cancel out of that, scale on everything except the Z axis, so use Shift and Z to exclude Z, so it's just going out along the X and Y, and that gives us a little bit of a rim. We'll select this bit, extrude, move it down a bit, and then scale to move it in a little bit, and that'll be our kind of soil. I'm just going to give it basic colours for now rather than textures, because the plant is the important bit. So I'm just going to give it the same browny colour for the soil. but everything else, so Control and I to invert, I've created a new material channel which I'm going to assign those faces to. I can come out of edit mode and now I can create a material for that channel, and I'm just going to make it a kind of a, I don't know, I guess a kind of a terracotta sort of colour, sort of plant potty. And then I think what I'll do is I'll select that face, Control and S, and I'm going to put the cursor in the middle of that face, because that's where my plant's going to grow out of, and we'll spawn another cylinder, which, because the cylinder is 2 meters tall, as it says here, depth 2 meters, it also says over here z-axis 2 meters, I'm just going to move it up by 1 meter so that it's actually sitting on the soil in the plant pot, and we'll apply the location. Actually, no, that's not what I wanted. We'll select that face there, and I'm going to put the origin in the centre where the cursor is. I could have just, because the cursor was already in the right place, I could have just said set origin to 3D cursor, and it's there. So now when I scale it down, I'm going to scale it by 1/2 so it's only 1 meter tall, and you can see that there. I've did that by hitting S for scale and then 0.5 and enter. And then we want to make it thin because it's going to be the stalk of our plant. So scale it down on everything except the Z, S for scale, Control and Z, and just move the cursor in. Scale, Control Z, and just keep moving it in till it kind of looks about right. And when you're happy enough with that, we'll apply the rotation and the scale. We've got edges, so I'm going to do auto smooth again, and that smooth that all out. And then we want to make this stalk a bit curvy. We don't want it straight up like a stick, so we need to give it some geometry to make it curve. So I tab into edit mode, Control and R for a loop cut, and here you can either use your scroll wheel up and down for the number of loop cuts, or you can actually type in a value for quickness, and I just like to see, let's make it about 20 loop cuts will be about enough. That'll be enough for it to be able to bend. We can then also that's lovely singing, Triffid, but you might want to mute yourself.
Sorry.
It's no bother. Little bit too much geometry here as well. So what I'm going to do is the same as before. Select similar direction. Now I want to select every other vertical line. So select checker deselect, which hasn't done what I wanted. That is bizarre, because it should have done. So what we're going to do is select every other line. That's probably because I got the loop cuts put in first, and then I realised I had too much geometry. So we'll get rid of those. X and dissolve edges. That's a bit better. That's a sensible number of vertical cuts. And then if I go into face mode and select this top one, I want to scale this down to a little bit of a point. And we'll turn on proportional editing. Without proportional editing, when I scale it, you'll see that that's all that's happening, and it's bending here at the very top loop cut. With proportional editing, we can scale it And you can see there's this circle of influence, and when I start moving it and using my scroll wheel to change the circle of influence, you can see which vertices it's affecting. So I'm going to scale that down a bit, and it's kind of starting to go to a point from about midway, which is fine. Actually, I'm going to undo that because I don't like the fact that the loop cuts are getting closer together. The horizontal loop cuts are getting closer together. If you can see them moving up and down. So I'm going to exclude the Z-axis, Control and Z, and now my horizontal loop cuts look much better. And that's going to make a much more even curve. So now what we want is we need another leaf. So again, File, Import, Images as Planes. We'll find the leaf that I've got somewhere. Leaves. Just pick one, any one you like the look of. I think I'm probably... Actually, I know this is a tree leaf, but I'm tempted to use it because I think it looks interesting. So we'll flatten that, have a look at it, move it over to about there. I want to fix that thing from alpha blend to alpha clip. And I want to move the origin, which is in the center. I want it down here. And the easiest way to move the origin is when you're in object mode, under options, origins only. And when you do G for move, we can just pop it where we want it. That'll do. And then we can turn that off. So that's the sprouting point of our leaf. So I'm now going to move this so that this origin point is at the cursor. And the easiest way is to just right click and choose snap selection to cursor. And there it is. What I didn't do with these leaves, which I will do, is to make them double-sided, because when you bring that into Unity, you're going to lose half the leaves. It's going to look very sparse, because any leaves that are facing the opposite direction will be invisible. So I'll do that with this one now. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. The easiest way probably is just to go into edit mode, select that face and extrude it up a tiny bit. You could use the solidify modifier, whichever you're happiest with, it doesn't matter. And if I go in, press 3 to go into side view, I'm going to now move this up on the Z-axis, so GZ, to roughly where you want your leaf to start. And then I'm going to rotate it a bit just to make it look a little bit more realistic, I guess. And we need to scale it down a bit because that's just a bit too big. So maybe something like that, perhaps. Maybe something like that. I don't know. We'll see how it looks. We need to apply the rotation and scale again. And then we're going to use an array modifier. With an array, you're actually creating, see, we've got a number 2 here. We're creating copies of it, all lined up side by side. This here where it says factor x1 just means that for that one width, it's every one width of this plane, we're getting another one added on. You could increase this and actually have spaces between them or have them overlapping or whatever. But 1 is the standard, and you can change that on each of the axes as well. You can have it going upwards like a step as well or whatever. But we're not going to do that. We're not using the relative offset. We're going to use the object offset, because what we want is an external, another object which is going to control the placement of the leaves. And we'll do that by adding in an empty, which you wouldn't see. It doesn't actually, it's not a mesh, doesn't do anything, it's just a controller. So we've got our empty, and here we can choose the empty with the eyedropper. And because the empty is below the leaf, That's why the leaf looks like it's going downwards. But if we're to move it up on the Z, you see it goes upwards. And we want to choose roughly how many leaves we're going to have. So in this instance, I'm going to say maybe 20. And then we can choose the empty and we can bring it down. And you can see the top of the stem is this white bit here. We want to have it go past that a little bit, maybe by about a third, something like that. I don't know. And then we're going to rotate it. We'll rotate the empty on the Z axis. So we get this going on. And I want to rotate it till it starts looking a bit kind of random. I mean, it is going to look a bit kind of mathematical, but you don't want it to be like perfect line or a perfect spiral. Just have it looking a little bit random will do. I'll try changing that a bit more. Come on. Maybe something like that. And then normally you would have, as you get to the top of the plant, the leaves get smaller. And because this is an array, it affects scale. Unless you apply the scale, it affects scale as well as rotation and placement. So if we scale this down, you can see the top leaves get smaller as well. They get bigger, they get smaller. So I'm going to scale it until the top leaf, I don't know if you can see it very well there. We'll go into, nah, you can't see it like that. We want the stem of the top leaf to be really at the top of the stalk here. So I'm just going to scale it up a little bit more until it's about there. That doesn't look too bad. If you think it's looking sparse or these leaves at the top aren't very good, you can always add a few more leaves. We'll maybe make it 30 and scale it down a little bit more. Just select the empty and scale that down. And that, when you're happy enough with that, we can hide the empty. We don't need to use it anymore. So just to stop me from accidentally grabbing it and doing something and messing it all up, I've just pressed H to hide. And then the stalk here, we'll give it a material, and I'm just going to choose again something from the leaf so it kind of matches in. I don't really like that shade, so let's pick something a bit darker, something like that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to make this a bit wiggly, so we're going to add in a curve, not a mesh, a curve, and a path curve I find is about the best. We'll rotate it on the Y by 90, and then we'll reduce. Am I going to reduce the scale a bit? Don't know. We'll go into front view, into edit mode, and we'll just scale that down a bit. Move it up, G and Z to move it a bit. Scale it down a bit more. We don't want it to be exactly the height of the plant. We want a little bit more room to play with. But this is what's going to create the wiggle. So if we right click and subdivide, it now has placed some more nodes here, some more vertices to work with. Which just gives us a bit more control. We select on the stem, and here we're going to add another modifier. We're going to add a curve modifier, and we're going to choose the NURBS curve path that we've just created. We can't see it here, but we can see it up here. So just select the NURBS path, and the same for the leaves. So we'll minimize the array, and we'll go into curve and select the NURBS path. So now we should be able to go into front view, select the NURBS path, go into edit mode, and just start moving some of these points around. So if I take this one and move it over a little bit. We've still got proportional editing on. Let's turn that off. Move that. So G for grab and X. We can drag that a bit. You can see there's a bit of a black line here. That is your path. And because we've connected the stem to it, we can move this around and start sculpting our plant a little bit.
Nice.
We can do the same in side view, maybe make that a little bit wiggly. GY, GY, we'll move that one over that way. GY. So now, when we come out of that, we've got a bit of a wiggly plant. And you could select this NURBS path and move it up and down on the Z-axis, and you kind of can adjust your plant to how you like it. And you can always adjust those NURBS, those points rather, on the curve. However you prefer, it's entirely up to you how you do it. But when you're reasonably happy with it, all you do, I'm just going to hide the NURBS path now. You select the stem and apply all your modifiers. So top to bottom, array first, and then the curve. That was the leaves, and then the stem, and apply the curve, and we're done. And you could select the leaves, select the stem, join them together. We'll apply the rotation and scale, and for the pot we'll apply, I don't know if I'd already applied the rotation and scale, but we could literally join everything together. So now we have a pot plant that we can just put wherever we want. Normally I would put the origin at the bottom so that when you spawn it into Unity, you can drag it onto a surface as long as that surface has got a collider and your object is there. So we've got a little pot plant. I haven't done the hanging plant yet, which I really wanted to do, but we've only got 2 minutes. Well, technically we've got 10 if people want to stay, because we were 10 minutes late getting started. So whichever you prefer, I'm happy. I'm happy to carry on if people want me to carry on a little bit longer. But it's a totally different method again to do a hanging plant. It could be a climbing plant actually. So for this, instead of starting with a cylinder, I would just go straight for the curve. It could be a path or a bezier or whatever you're happy using. I'm more comfortable with paths. I'm going to scale it down again. Apply the scale. Rotate it on the Y. Move it up. So it's kind of, well, doesn't matter. If it's a hanging plant, could be dangling off a branch here, could be anything. But yeah, just do the same thing, subdivide it a bit so you've got some stuff to work with. Make it a bit jiggly looking. Oh, goodness gracious.
This is a reminder. Take your medication. This is a reminder. Take your medication.
Just muted myself there because Alexa was giving me a reminder. You really didn't need to hear. Let's move this a bit as well. That'll do. So that's going to be a kind of wiggly vine thing. And under here in the object properties, object data properties, you can see, you know, it's a curve because it's a curve. Normally when you've got a mesh with this one, it's a little triangle. This shows you that it's actually a curve. And we want to reduce the geometry that it's going to result in as much as we can. So I always turn this down to 1, and you've got these angles. Just turn it up till it kind of looks okay.
Here's somebody.
3's all right, 4's all right. I usually go for
Hey,
about
Fundy.
3. Hello, Fundy.
Hey, hey, welcome.
Knew I recognised that voice.
Hey, hey. Yeah. It's a very unique
Resolution will
voice.
turn all the way down. You could have 0, you could have 1. 0 is basically if I turn up the
Yeah, it's me.
depth
Hey,
here
Fundy.
and turn
Hey, hey.
it to shade
I'm
flat,
good.
you
How
can
about you?
see you've got 4 sides.
Oh,
It's
no.
basically like
Hey,
an
hey.
elongated cube thing.
Yeah, it's
1
always
will
good
give
to
you
see
6
Fundy.
sides. I usually
Yeah,
go
it
with
is
4
Lisa.
because you
She's
can't
doing
tell
her
when
glass.
it's smoothed anyway or auto smoothed. So just give it a bit of thickness, however you want it, because
It's
this is a
okay.
kind of vine or something like that. We'll want it quite thin. And then because it's hanging in this instance, I'm going to take this this vertex here and use Alt and S to scale it down to a point. It's not S because we're not working with a mesh. It's Alt S when you're working with curves. So Alt S, and we can make this a bit thicker as well. And when you're reasonably happy with that, we can then convert it to a curve, and we do that by right clicking, convert to a curve, convert to a mesh. And now when we zoom in, we've actually got geometry there with vertices and everything else. So that's exactly what we want. And then we just do the whole particle system thing again. Now I was going to do an ivy leaf, but I'm not going to because it means wasting time creating another leaf. So I think I'll just use this maple thing, which is wrong for a hanging vine, but you know, who cares? That's what we're going to use. So always remember, where possible, Control and A, apply your rotation and scale. And then we can add a particle system. Hair, again, this time I'm not worried about not including certain faces. We can just have leaves all over it. So into advanced so that we get the rotation bit. Path, object, select your object, which is leaf maple up here. We'll turn this down to about 25 to start with. We've got the leaves on there. Change from velocity hair to normal tangent. And then we can start playing with the settings. So we'll have lots of scale randomness. We won't make the leaves that much bigger, maybe something like that. We'll turn, I think in this instance I might just crank these all the way up, and I'll crank up the number of leaves. And we'll also give the stem a material, which actually what we'll do is we'll just use that bark brownie colour, because it's brownie coloured on ivy anyway, that kind of thing, isn't it? And there we go, we've got something hanging. You could make something that's like coming out of a hanging basket or hanging off a branch. You can have it going the other way and have it climbing up a wall or a column. You can mould your curve so it's spiralling round a column, for instance, and then put leaves all over it. Yeah, actually that kind of looks a bit like a grapevine, doesn't it, there, with those leaves.
Yeah.
And again, same thing, select your object, make instances real, select your NURBS path, join them together, and then just remove the particle system. And you've got your leaves. And because
cool.
these are
Yeah.
single-sided leaves as well, which is a bit of a bummer, I'll show you this now while I've got Unity open here. Once you've done your object, make sure that your scale and rotation is set. Do File, Export, FBX, and just go to wherever your project is in Unity. You want to click on Selected Objects, otherwise it'll, if you've got loads of stuff and you're building an entire world, it's going to export everything as one FBX. Not ideal. So Selected Objects and Mesh. And I'm going to call it Vine. Export. So when you go back into Unity, there is your object which you can drag in. But you can see, if I zoom in on it, there's meant to be a leaf here. You can see the square where it should be, and there's meant to be one here. I'm just going to fix the material on it though, so you can see a little bit better. Oh, what have I done, Lisa, you plonker? That's not what I meant to do. I meant to click on there. I'm just going to create a quick material. I'm not going to use Amplify because we don't really have time. I'm just going to use Autodesk Interactive for now, and we'll drag the material into there, tell it it's cut out, and then we'll put that onto the leaves, so there we can see it a little bit better. But you can see there's leaves that you can't see, and the reason is because, if I can zoom in on that leaf, you can see it from that side, but you can't see it from the other side, and it's because we've done it on a single-sided plane. So you can it only renders the side that has the normal pointing outwards from it. And we need that to be double-sided, really. You can either create a double-sided shader, which actually uses more resources to process, or because it's just a plane, you're probably just as well creating a bit of depth to that as well. So the easiest way is to separate this by material. Anything with the leaf material we want separated out from the mesh. So we'll select everything, P for separate. I don't know why P for separate. Separate, I guess. And we're going to separate by material. So now we've got two objects. We've got the leaves.
Maybe the P for part.
Yeah, possibly. And we've got the stem.
Yeah.
So the leaves, we can now, just to be quick, add a solidify modifier. And if we zoom in on one of the leaves, you can see it's got two layers there. And we just want to reduce that down a bit, so it's quite close together, because you don't want it to be noticeable that the leaves are going to look like they're shifting position or anything. And then we can apply that and then just join them together again and re-export. Vine. Back into Unity, and all the leaves appear exactly as it should be.
Ooh.
And then what you can do generate light map UVs if you're going to be baking your lighting, which you should be if you want your world to be performant. Generate light map UVs, or you can create a second UV channel and unwrap your object manually. Second UV channel, if you haven't got this ticked, Unity will automatically use the second UV channel as the light map channel. And the reason you need a second channel is because if you were to look at this now, you can't even see the leaves because every leaf is a square. This bit here is the stem, and it's just all UV islands overlapping one another, and that will totally break your baked lighting. island should be a discrete island on its own, so it gets its own shadow information and is not being overwritten or overlapped by any other islands. So if we created a second UV channel, we've got it selected. We could do average island scale, UV, pack islands, and there we've got the stem, which isn't right. The stem shouldn't look like a square because it's a big long thing. I would probably unwrap that manually, which I'm not going into right now, but we'll do it maybe next week, finish the plants, because I'm still not quite done with everything. But because we've got some large and small leaves, that is actually correct as well. And you just need to give it a little bit more padding so that you don't get shadows overlapping each other. Not quite that much, just a bit. And that'll be enough to bake your lighting correctly. Export, FBX, every time you do a change, re-export it. And that's it, ready to bake your lighting. And I think next week what we'll do is we'll put a few things together and make a little scene with these plants, and I'll show how to unwrap the tree trunk as well easily, and apply a bark texture. We'll maybe dot a few trees around and have a few vines and things, and make a little woodland scene perhaps. So yeah, that's next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go.
Very
That's
cool.
it for this week. We've gone over time. I'm just pleased that there
Yay.
wasn't any other events. But I hope somebody at least learned
That's a good
something that they
lesson.
can take away and use that.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good lesson, Lisa.
good, thank you.
What a little bit I did
Thank you
that.
for coming along, everybody. And
Yeah.
I'll get this uploaded to my YouTube channel, so you can always go over it again and take your time if you want to see exactly how things are working. But yeah, next week let's carry on with that, shall we, and do a little woodland thing, and maybe bring in a few of the little mushrooms I made in an earlier lesson as well, and some rocks. Hey ho, yeah. Let's make it a creative thing and put a little scene together. And if we can do that quickly, we'll upload it as well and go and visit next week.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course you can.
Can this be done in the headset? Or should you,
No.
could you use your PC?
Nah, it's just
No,
a
this
PC, I think.
this has to be done on a PC. Blender runs on
PC.
Mac OS and Linux and Windows, but it doesn't run on a headset. It is a PC,
Yeah.
piece of software.
Just like Unity.
Yeah, same as Unity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what you might have fun with, Fondy, in here is the world builder, the AI world builder, which is good fun.
Ooh.
Where you literally just tell it what you want, literally verbally speak it, and you can generate whatever you like to build your world with. That's quite cool.
Oh, yeah.
Does it do live?
Yes.
Is that like a world that you can just go to?
Yes, it is. If you give me 1 second, let's stop
Maybe you
the
can-
recording.
It's here in Banda.
Yeah.